All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webinar to discuss the COVID-19 impact on the retail secondary market. My name is Claire Mitchell. I'm a strategic account manager at bstock and will be serving as moderator for today's discussion. As we get into the webinar, please feel free to use the portal on your screen to send in questions through the Q&A tab on your toolbar. We'll plan to do a Q&A at the end of the presentation. Today's webinar will be hosted by Jess Morris, our Marketplace Manager for bstock Supply Europe. Jess will be leading a conversation along with bstock's VP of Marketing, Garrett Sievers, who will discuss the pandemic and how the pandemic has affected the secondary market buyers and sellers across Europe. And with that, I'll hand it off to you, Jess.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone, and welcome. As Claire introduced, I'm the Marketplace Manager for Supply Europe. Supply Europe's the many-to-many marketplace, very similar to an eBay model, but this is for bulk, overstock, and customer returns. Our model fits quite nicely into the circular economy, and it allows buyers to access goods within the secondary market from smaller retails, online sellers, such as Amazon FBA sellers, and they can all access the subscription style model. bstock operates at the end of the life cycle of retail, and it provides a solution for excess inventory. This means the current situation has been very interesting for us, and we thought it was worth sharing some of our insight. So here you can see the model of how we allow buyers and sellers to access a single marketplace to sell inventory, create margin, control their own brands, improve the operational efficiency of the sale of overstock, which is traditionally a very manual process, and in doing so, creating competition and bidding through auction, increasing that recovery rate. So, what does the current landscape of the retail sector in Europe look like? We've all been witness to the uneven application of store closures. We've seen grocery stores and essential stores staying open, while those less essential retail stores, clothing, fashion, remaining closed. This sees essential goods not moving into the secondary market. So grocery goods, health and beauty, any medication items, any medical items, all are firmly within the primary market. Whereas the non-essential goods are moving very slowly. We've seen with Amazon FBA, with the halt on sending any new inventory into their FBA warehouses, seeing that overstock build up within existing warehouses and throughout the logistics chain. This means that at the end of this pandemic, we will see a huge influx of overstock of these non-essentials goods flooding into the secondary market. Retail sector has also had to cope with furloughs, staff being off sick or self-isolating in order to protect themselves and their family, and also having to enforce the 2-meter social distancing rule across most European countries. This means an innovative way of working, trying to work around the challenges, ensure staff keep safe, and trying to deliver to their consumers. We've seen the increase in contactless delivery and click and collect models in order to try and achieve this. So let's look at the type of stock that is most popular. Here we have information from Channel Advisor, which manages e-commerce marketplaces and the placement of goods. We can see from the black bars the first cases of COVID appearing in Europe outside of China, and then the second black bar showing when governments across Europe started to enforce lockdowns. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen a sharp increase in home and garden goods, in sporting goods, and a sudden increase in business and industrial goods as people try and set up home offices before this starts to bottom out. If I move your attention to the bottom of the graph, we can start to see a serious drop in auto tools as cars are less on the road, as people are not commuting to work, a drop in luxury goods such as jewelries and watches, which are not required when you're working from home, and also surprisingly a drop in cell phones and accessories, potentially people just tightening their belts at home, not trying to spend too much extra on these items until we know what the economy is going to look like. So what does the bstock data say? So here we're looking at the overall GMV, or the volume of stock coming through the marketplace, and the recovery of that stock, so the amount of value that is being returned to sellers against the retail value. The two black bars indicate different stages within the COVID process, the first initial cases, outbreak, and how the market reacts to that. And then after the second bar, we're looking at how businesses are coping during this time. So here we can see a serious drop in recovery rate, as expected, that most businesses will have felt during this time as the market prepares itself and braces for the impact of the lockdowns. However, what we have shown is a resilience within the marketplace with an increase of 13.6% in recovery rate of goods. So there is serious demand for these second-hand goods within the marketplace that is being shown with these numbers and the bidding from our buyer base. So let's delve a bit deeper now into the different categories. So here's home and living. As we saw on the Channel Advisor data, home and living is an incredibly popular category. We've found that, again, there was quite a drop. There was also a drop in the volume in the marketplace. This is expected as we see an increase in demand within the consumer and the primary marketplaces. We'll see a drop in the movement of this stock, the essential items, as it were, the popular items, into the secondary marketplace. However, we see this market again show more resilience within this category, with an increase in recovery of 9.5% in comparison to the pre-COVID, as buyers and demand increase for this type of stock. Let's look again at a second popular category, consumer electronics. We can see heavy fluctuations in the volume coming through our marketplace on this, with a tiny increase in recovery rate. This is always a popular category for our buyers. Yet when we move into the serious lockdown section in the right hand side, we see a serious spike of 14.6% increase in recovery rate against this stock due to the demand of these items and the increased bidding from our buyers. So then we look on to fashion. Fashion has probably been the sector that has been damaged the most, experienced the most change, with frontline stores closing and only online retail, and the fact that it's marked as a non-essential, and with people staying at home, no longer buying upfront consumer. So we've actually seen a spike here in the increased amount of stock, as expected, into our marketplace. As there are few people buying, there's more overstock, and we see this flood straight away into the secondary market, as you can see through this data. What we've also seen is our marketplace and buyers respond to this positively, with an increase in recovery rate to the introduction of this stock, and then a further increase against that in the second half as lockdown increases. However, we do see a decrease in the volume of stock coming through, most likely due to warehouse closures. It's not a priority anymore for our sellers to place the stock, and therefore it's increased demand within the secondary marketplace, and again has the bidders bidding aggressively for this stock. So what other impacts have we seen? So looking at logistics, this has probably been one of the biggest challenges retailers have faced. Initially, in the initial lockdown, we saw great long queues around Poland and some of the other countries within Europe that was seriously hindering the introduction of any new people into their countries, testing all lorry drivers, and we saw big black marks indicating on the sixfold data, indicating long queues at these borders. What we're now seeing is a much more positive view. This was actually a screenshot I took yesterday of the sixfold data, showing that apart from the usual areas around Switzerland and into Italy, which is around 1 to 2 hour delay, we're seeing flow of goods between borders returning almost to their natural state, which is a positive sign. One of the challenges we will definitely see that will slowly flow down into the secondary market is the warehouse space. As we've seen a build-up of non-essential items not being sold, we will start to see those warehouses build as new stock enters into 2021. This will also be additionally impacted with Brexit. So with that, I will now hand over to Garrett, and he can discuss what we're seeing within our buyer cohorts.
Hey, good afternoon, and thanks, Jess. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. As Jess walked us through some of the categories and logistics impacts of COVID-19, we wanted to share with you what we're seeing as an impact to the buyers on our network or the small businesses that buy the products from our sellers. And it's no surprise that small businesses across Europe have been really hit hard by COVID-19. And we like to think of our buyers as showing great grit and resilience, and that's being tested. On the left-hand side, you can see the cumulative impact. COVID-19 is not discriminating across any country. The cumulative impact on retail sales is significant and likely larger than even depicted here. And you're seeing it obviously in the headlines, whether it be jobs being threatened or the government doing its best to stimulate the local economies across the countries of Europe to tackle these problems. So it's clearly a big impact on the businesses who are most vulnerable at this time. Next slide, please. So we asked our buyers to get a better idea of how they're changing to the new reality of COVID-19. And small businesses and the buyers in our network are the innovative, they are the resilient, and they're also changing their behaviors. At the outset, the negative impact on their business has been a substantial decline in their revenue, 64% decrease in their revenue since the outbreak of COVID-19. However, the buyers are adjusting to this. They're changing the categories that they can sell, moving to more essential goods versus non-essential, finding new channels of distribution, moving their business model online from more bricks and mortar, and obviously in some cases reducing the amount of hours for their employees. But they're adjusting, and we'll talk about how they're adjusting here in a moment. As you look out, these buyers are indicating that their buying intentions over the next 90 days are roughly 50-50. Some are definitely going to buy less, but an equal amount are going to increase their inventory purchases over the next 90 days. As Jess mentioned, fortunately, they're not experiencing shipping delays. Their challenges are more around the access to capital. And at this point, very few of them have been able to access any of the government subsidies intended to help them mitigate the effects of COVID-19. But they're adjusting. And as we look at the categories that they're interested in, also interesting and consistent with what Jess had shared with you, their intentions to buy more computer electronics, computer equipment, consumer electronics, health and beauty, and home and garden are evident in the categories that bstock is supporting, as well as what we're seeing in the macro environment. So those things they tend to buy more of. Currently, they're intending to buy less of apparel, appliances in certain categories. We do see an uptick in cold refrigerated storage appliances, but automotive supplies, books, movies, music, cell phones, and even grocery, at this point, our buyers are indicating that they are intend to buy less. Now, with all that being said, it is a fluid market and things can change quickly. And as each of the countries start to make decisions to open up, we'll see this likely move back to normal levels. And one of the powerful things about the bstock network is the diversified buyer base. So as countries open up, such as Germany or France, at the right time, we'll have an activated buyer base there to start bidding on these categories and seeing an influx of demand. Next slide, please. So what's happening on our platform? Our buyers have remained very resilient. And similar to the way Jess broke this down, we're taking a look at the number of bids in the top graph per auction. And bids are an important measurement of a two-sided network because it creates the competition that drives price and recovery rates for our sellers. And so making sure that we have a robust and vibrant marketplace where bids are being placed with frequency is a key element of the success of our marketplace for our customers. So as you see here, during the months of February and March, we certainly saw a reduction in bids as the world and Europe adjusted to the new reality of COVID-19 and tried to understand the impact. So we saw about 11% decline versus pre-COVID-19 levels. However, April is a bit of a rebound, and it's starting to continue into May, as we've seen a 25% lift from the lowest points of COVID-19 in bids per auction. So we're seeing this resilience and improvement in bids. And bids, again, are a great measure of health of a marketplace and drive up those recovery rates. On the bottom, we also want to make sure that we're not just getting bids from a small number of bidders. And so we're actually looking at the number of bidders per auction. And we see here there was a 7% decline initially, but that's rebounding to a positive 7% from the lowest points during the outbreak. So overall, the platform remains resilient. We have bids and bidders who continue to be driving activity on the marketplace, and they're adjusting to the effects of COVID-19.
Thank you, Garrett.
Take it away, Jess.
So looking forwards then, moving on from April, looking into May, we're starting to see some lockdowns easing across these countries. And this is fantastic news, you know, for upfront businesses to businesses within the secondary market alike. So here's sort of just a breakdown of where each country is going, with Spain beginning to ease the majority of lockdowns. Germany deconfinement actually began on the 20th of April, which is where we see a majority of our uptick, especially in supply Europe. And UK lockdown, Italian and France. One of the strengths of the bstock network, as Garrett mentioned, was that we have buyers and sellers across all countries, all 28 countries within Europe. So this means that despite some challenges in certain countries, we can still back up and support sales within other areas. And we will start to see the shift in data, and it'll be really interesting to look at May's data and see how the impact as lockdowns are released throughout Europe and begin to raise. So based on this information and the lockdown easing, what are our projections? So we foresee demand won't return in full force. The economy will, as expected, take a hit globally. And so consumers will be very risk averse when it comes to purchasing, which will see unsold inventory flowing into the secondary market. The benefit of this is that with the economy downturn, consumers will be much smarter in purchasing second-hand items off Facebook, off Amazon, off eBay, and therefore we should see a real growth within the secondary market as people shop around for good deals. This means that B2B solutions will keep inventory levels lean. So those built up warehouses with overstock packed in corners, stock that was meant to have been sold in winter, spring, summer, that have missed their opportunity, can now be sold within the secondary market, and there'll be a large amount of buyers. There'll be a diverse amount of buyers as well, as they're based across Europe, and they'll be looking for returned and excess stock. As discussed, and we'll also expect to see a new generation of buyers with a compressed economy and more challenging time for many people. We will expect to see an increase in the number of buyers within our marketplaces as they try and flex their businesses and try and find other routes in order to increase revenue. So with that, thank you very much for listening in. I will pass back to Claire for any questions.
Great, thank you, Jess, and thank you both for sharing with us today. This was great. All right, everyone, so now we will go ahead and proceed to the Q&A portion of our webinar. Again, please send in the questions through the Q&A tab on your toolbar. Looks like we already got a couple in, so Jess, this first question is for you. Are there specific strategies that sellers should be thinking about now to prepare for returning to this quote-unquote new normal?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a really good question. This is something that we can certainly help with. It would be great to look at what the stock is specifically. We always tend to break down by category and conditions. So I'd keep our good condition stock separate and our categories kept within categories. And then we can look at how do we roll out that stock to the marketplace so we don't saturate it, but so that we get those goods flowing for our sellers and get the cash flow going.
Great. So Garrett, you talked about a huge surge of excess inventory is expected to hit the secondary market in the second half of 2020. Are the buyers ready?
Yeah, I think they are. The reason I say that is because the opening of countries across Europe represents the opportunity, and they are the most nimble and able to adjust their businesses to the new environment. The access to capital is starting to improve, and with government subsidies hitting across the world, in this case, buyers are starting to understand what categories are in demand, adjusting their business model and the way they go to market. And so we feel, and we're seeing particularly in the months of April, a resurgence in these bids and bidders. It gives us confidence that our buyers are ready and adjusting to make sure that they can fulfill the needs of their customers.
Yeah, great. And it's great to hear that the buyer network is just resilient. So I'm going to ask another one for you, Garrett. What is the portion of online resellers versus brick and mortar in the buyer network?
Yeah, great question. And it's not, oftentimes they are doing both. So approximately 70 to 72% of our buyers indicate they have an online platform with 20-ish% with bricks and mortar, and then many of them are, particularly in Europe, are doing a large export business of over 15 to 20%. So that's over 100% because they have a mixture of all three in some cases, of online, bricks and mortar, and export. But there's definitely a higher propensity of them, and certainly doing more business online and adjusting, particularly now, to that new environment, because bricks and mortar have been impacted more severely for the obvious reasons of the shutdowns that have been in place and enforced.
Right. Great. Thank you. Jess, this looks like a good question for you. What are some of the biggest geographical differences or similarities that you're seeing?
Absolutely, and this has been incredibly interesting as we've discussed with our sellers. We've found that despite Germany's early lockdown and very strict measures almost from the off-go, our German sellers have found, very easy ways to work around very quickly, which has been very impressive. In complete contrast, we've seen our UK sellers really struggle with the strict government lockdowns. This may be due to not being able to create social distancing, or a lot of them don't own their own warehouses and are therefore relying on warehouse owners to support the continued opening of those warehouses. And the other thing we've seen with Poland again had a very, very strict lockdown. Italy was obviously hit the hardest. And in those two regions, we've seen Poland continue almost seamlessly, which is very impressive despite long logistic delays. We've seen a continual buying and selling through to Latvia and Lithuania and out further east. Whereas Italy has struggled the most with getting logistics and shipping into the country, as many buyers have really struggled to find any truck drivers willing to drive across the border into Italy. So there have been a huge amount of variances between the countries across Italy, and it's been interesting and a steep learning curve for us as well to see how diverse our marketplace is and how we're able to bounce back and support in different areas depending on the challenges that each geographical region has faced.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, Jess. Thank you. And then just, Jess, I think this would probably be a good one for you to start. So where did most of the goods end up during the height of the pandemic? And do you kind of see that changing now?
So this is a really good question. I'm actually excited to see the data that comes out in May, because I am expecting a lot of goods to start to stay more within country. So traditionally we've seen quite a move from goods moving west to east. So goods mainly sold UK, Germany, and Italy, moving east to Latvia, Lithuania, Romania. And I'm hoping or expecting, partially as we see a decrease in stock within the primary marketplaces, I'm expecting to see more buyers within country purchasing stock from the same country in order to sell through their online channels. So currently we've seen no change, and we have seen stock continue to move from west to east. But I am expecting a change in May as we see an influx in overstock of local buyers buying from local sellers.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. So we have another question that came through, and Jess, we can start with you, and then maybe Garrett, we can have a follow-up from you on this. But so the prices in air freight went up naturally due to COVID. So what impact did the high air freight prices have?
That's a really interesting one. Majority of shipping, from what I understand, across Europe is truckloads. So a lot of our buyers rely on trucking rather than flight and air freight. So I haven't, but I have seen definitely an increase in pricing, and therefore the impact on buyers bidding potentially a bit more cleverly in order to offset the additional costs. We've seen also, with the increase in cost of shipping, smaller lots being more popular, with pallet loads rather than truckloads being more popular for our buyer base.
Right, great. Thank you, Jess. So that wraps everything up for today, guys. Thank you again for your time and the questions that come through. If we didn't answer all of the questions, we'll be sure to follow up with you and answer those. But thank you both. So that wraps things up for us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again. Again, we'll be sending out a copy of the presentation tomorrow, but please don't hesitate to reach out in the meantime. That's Jess's contact information there. Happy to answer questions for you, and hope everyone stays well in the meantime. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.